I'm standing in the doorway, watching Laura, this furious woman, getting drenched in the rain. Her fiery red hair clings to her face, and despite the downpour, I can clearly hear her shouting. It turns out my wife, Samantha, has been involved with Laura's husband, and Laura wants me to put a stop to it. Not long ago, while I was away for work, Samantha hit me with the bombshell that she wanted a divorce. I was shocked. Rain was pouring down the hotel window as she told me we'd been apart too long. But the thing is, I'd only been gone a couple of weeks. We had barely spent 5 months together since I returned from the army, and I was completely oblivious to any issues between us. She never voiced a single concern. As it turns out, she had been seeing this guy for at least 3 months, possibly longer, all while I was out working. I started to piece it together about a week before Laura confronted me, but even then, I didn't have solid evidence. I had been trying to figure out a plan. Samantha had agreed to counseling before I learned about her affair, but she dropped out after just 2 sessions. I suspected she was trying to manipulate the counselor into convincing me to stay, wanting to maintain a facade of concern, especially in front of her parents. Meanwhile, she continued her relationship with this guy, living off my money until she felt ready to leave her own family. Samantha and I have 2-year-old twin girls, Ella and Nia. She often left them with me after work so she could hit the gym or go for runs, all in the name of staying fit. Little did I know, after those workouts, she'd sneak off to be with her lover. I was devastated. Every time I tried to talk things out, she would explode in anger and turn the blame on me, despite being the one in the wrong. She'd complain about how hard it was to care for the kids while I worked, claiming I was using them against her, which couldn't be further from the truth. I spent more time with our daughters than she did, even with my full-time job. Navigating the divorce with legal counsel was disheartening. In our state, adultery didn't carry much weight legally, it hardly led to serious consequences. Samantha knew that the courts usually favored awarding custody and child support to mothers, no matter their actions. Alimony for several years was also typical, especially with young kids involved. This ensured that the ex-wife could stay home, playing the devoted mom instead of rushing back to work. So there I was, confronted by this tall, awkward woman with messy red hair, a beak-like nose, and thin, angry lips. After having a 6-month-old baby, she had put on some extra weight that didn't suit her slender frame. The combination of her anger and the cold rain left her skin blotchy. I was too stunned to say anything, so I stepped aside, opened the door wider, and gestured for her to come in. I knew that having our neighbors hear her shouting at me wouldn't do anyone any favors. She stormed in, continuing her loud tirade as I walked to the dining table and pulled out a chair for her. I sat down, waiting for the storm to pass. Eventually, her anger crumbled into bitter tears, and she started to tremble and sob. Her head fell into her hands, her wet hair forming a limp, dark copper mound on the table. I waited until her runny nose finally stopped. "Are you done?" I asked quietly. She shot me an icy glare, her red eyes filled with rage. Sniffling a couple of times, she still didn't respond. So I continued, "If I could fix this, I would." "I can't stand it any more than you do," I kept saying, trying to explain how the law worked and why I was at such a disadvantage. "You want me to confront her without losing my cool, but that could easily land me in jail or worse, on the streets. Not exactly a great plan, right?" We sat there in heavy silence for a while until I finally stood up to make some hot tea. The rain outside was chilling to the bone, and I couldn't help stealing glances at her. Laura wasn't the typical beauty, but there was something about her that drew my attention. As the warmth of the tea spread through her, she shivered and murmured, "Wow, I didn't realize how cold I was." Suddenly, she noticed her own wet shirt and cursed quietly, wrapping her arms around herself. I couldn't help but sigh. Somehow, this was the most excitement I'd had in months. "Need a sweater? Which one's your wife's?" I asked, fetching a hoodie that she quickly pulled on. What followed felt like an unexpected striptease as she wriggled out of her soaked shirt and bra, then slipped into the hoodie. I grabbed her wet clothes and tossed them in the dryer, trying to pretend I wasn't watching her little show. Handing her a towel, I suggested, "Why not dry your hair?" Gratefully, she started dabbing at her hair, and I couldn't help but notice how the hoodie accentuated her figure. It was strange to feel this attraction in such an unusual moment, but I let myself steal a glance. Once her hair was somewhat dry, she paused and grumbled, "I hate them." "Me too," I admitted, sensing we shared a pain that connected us. "Didn't see it coming." "I can't compare to her," she said, "she's fit and stunning. I've put on weight since having my kid." But the truth was, she wasn't overweight, just a little out of shape, much like me. "She's fit because she has the luxury of time." "And you're beautiful in your own way," I found myself saying, surprising even myself with a flicker of optimism. "So what do we do now?" she asked, looking lost. "I'm at a loss. Every time I think I'm making progress, I end up alone, broke, and fighting to see my kids." "What if you had proof of her cheating?" she mused. "It wouldn't matter in court, but it might give us an edge elsewhere." I considered this, thinking out loud. She sighed, "I just want to make them pay." For the first time, I felt a spark of alliance. "Let's think, there has to be a way to turn the tables," I said, feeling a strange camaraderie in our shared misery. "Seriously, we all slip up sometimes. We just need to catch them in the act." "The sneaky paychecks from his cousin, that's where we start," I said, piecing it all together. Those new fancy shoes in Samantha's closet didn't just appear out of nowhere, there was mystery cash flowing. Samantha's spending didn't add up. Laura's eyes lit up with a flicker of determination. "We could actually do this," I said, feeling hopeful. "Piece of cake. We'll round up the kids and do a little sleuthing. Think of us as a quirky mix of Magnum PI and the Brady Bunch." "No need for the kids to tag along," she replied, her mind racing ahead. "My sister Ella has Olivia, she can take them." "Where are your kids now?" she asked, glancing around before her eyes settled on the front door. "Upstairs, asleep," I replied. She scanned the room one more time before looking back at me. "Got any sweatpants? I'm soaked." Without hesitation, I went to grab a pair, watching as she kicked off her shoes. I motioned toward the bathroom, but instead, she turned away and, in one fluid movement, slipped out of her wet jeans and underwear. She took her time drying off, and the unspoken tension in the air was thick, an invitation hanging between us. It felt like she was on the edge, vulnerable, unsure if I'd reject her. After all, it would sting being turned down by someone who had also been betrayed and who hadn't been close to anyone in a long time. A wave of frustration surged within me, not at her, but at my wife for putting me in this impossible situation. Then, Laura's voice broke through the tension, shaky with emotion. "I can't believe Mark would do this to me." I stepped closer, my hand brushing her thigh. She shivered, and her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. My touch asked a question, maybe even answered one. "I might not like you much, but I hate him," she finally said, her voice a mixture of bitterness and defiance as she gently pushed me back. In response, I pulled off my sweater, letting it fall to the floor. The tension between us shifted, an unspoken invitation growing stronger. She stood there, still chilled from the rain, her skin cool against my warming hands. I pressed a soft kiss to her neck, just enough to send a shiver through her. She sighed, her guard crumbling as the resistance faded. Without wasting any more time, driven by a mix of desire and uncertainty, I lifted her onto the dining table. It was a bold move, one that matched the intensity of the moment and the chaos of our feelings. Afterward, as the adrenaline started to fade, she met my gaze with a smile that was both satisfied and full of something deeper, a new connection. In the quiet that followed, I gathered up her clothes and tossed them in the dryer. We sat there, still unclothed, with cold cups of tea sitting untouched on the table between us. Her eyes were heavy with emotion, and her fiery red curls were a tangled mess as she looked at me. "You knew this would happen, didn't you? The moment you let me in," she said, laughing. Her laugh caught me off guard, innocent, but with an underlying meaning. "Honestly, I didn't think about it until you started taking off your jeans," I admitted with a sly grin, the mood lightening just a bit. "I was scared you'd say no," she said, and for the first time, I felt a genuine smile creep onto my face. "How could I, especially after hearing about how Mark's been treating you?" "It's hard to believe," I said, shaking my head. She leaned in closer, a serious look in her eyes. "And Samantha? How could she ignore everything you've just told me? You're nothing like Mark." I sighed, feeling the weight of it all settle in. Samantha feels far away these days. She's wrapped up in her own struggles, ever since we had the twins. It's like we're walking two different roads. She's more of a mother than a wife now, I muttered, the tension between us thick with shared frustration and betrayal. I still don't like you, you witch, she shot back, her words sharp but lacking any real malice. We weren't enemies, just two people bound by the same misery. If we're gonna move forward, how about we ask your sister to watch the kids tomorrow? I suggested, half serious. We need to clear the air, literally and figuratively. This room, well, let's just say it smells a bit too much like what happened. I tried to lighten the mood with a joke about needing air freshener to cover up the evidence of our defiance. She laughed briefly, then got dressed and slipped out the door without another word. As the silence of the house settled around me, I threw myself into cleaning up. I made sure to erase every trace of what had just happened: towels, clothes, all of it spinning in the washing machine. When Samantha came home later that evening, the usual tension wasn't there. The arguments, the accusations, the endless cycle of denial and lies, they were nowhere to be found. She seemed puzzled, like she didn't know how to react to the sudden calm. It's strange how one reckless act can take the edge off the bitterness that's been building for years. Even the spotless kitchen caught her attention, and she casually mentioned how strong the air freshener smelled. I barely heard her. The next morning, I skipped our awkward routine of pretending everything was fine. No forced goodbye kiss, no guilty glance over my shoulder. I just left for work, sending a clear message that I was done wallowing in all of it. At the office, I arranged to borrow a buddy's car for the next few months, and Laura's sister, who looked eerily like her, agreed to watch the kids. Laura and I had a mission: investigate her cousin's construction company and see if there was anything shady going on. As we climbed into the car, Laura Winston said, "I'm sore. It's been a long time since I'd been with anyone, and, well, you weren't exactly gentle." I raised an eyebrow at her comment. "I didn't think you were asking for gentle," I shot back with a smirk, catching the slight smile she tried to hide. For the first time since we'd met, Laura had actually put on some makeup, though she didn't quite nail the application. Still, it was a sign, an effort to take back a little normalcy in the middle of all this chaos. Then, in a move that even surprised me, I veered off course and headed for the local shopping center. Our conversation along the way was stilted, full of awkward pauses and half-hearted attempts to talk that fizzled out as soon as they started. When we finally pulled into the parking lot, Laura looked at me, her confusion obvious. "Are they here?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "But if we want to hurt them where it counts, we need to lay some groundwork first." I led her inside, straight to the makeup counter at Macy's. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice a mix of defiance and curiosity. "Think of it as creating a new version of yourself," I explained. For the next hour, two makeup artists worked their magic, showing Laura how to apply makeup like a pro. By the time they were done, she didn't just look pretty, she was stunning in a way that demanded attention. There was a raw, undeniable allure about her now. This is perfect, I thought, even as I paid the $100 bill. Sure, that's grocery money, but it's worth it for what we're planning. As we left the store, Laura held onto her new treasures like they were worth more than anything else in the world. Laura eyed me skeptically. "So, what's the big plan? We get back at them by, what, making them pay through their own weaknesses?" I nodded. Mark's lost interest because he thinks he already knows everything. Samantha, on the other hand, she'll be seething with jealousy when she sees the new you. But here's the trick: keep the makeup under wraps at home. It's our secret weapon when we're out. I laid it all out, explaining every part of the plan in detail. Laura sat quietly, mulling it over. "This is a lot," she said after a moment. "Complicated, and it's going to take time." I shrugged, a half-smile forming on my lips. "Got a better idea?" Her faint grin conceded defeat. "No, not really," she whispered, her tone shifting as she playfully asked if she could use my place as a safe spot to take off the makeup before facing Mark. But when she emerged from the bathroom a few moments later, the mischievous glint in her eyes was unmistakable. She hadn't removed a thing, makeup still perfectly intact, but now, she wore nothing else. The message was clear. She was challenging her own earlier caution, pushing the boundaries.
I thought we agreed not to expect anything? I said, raising an eyebrow.
It'd be a waste to let this look go unnoticed, she teased, letting the towel drop to the floor without a second thought. Later, we headed to her sister's place, where Laura enlisted her sibling in our plan. It didn't take much convincing, her sister clearly held no love for Mark, making her the perfect accomplice in what we were about to do. In the months that followed, we both dove headfirst into self-improvement. I started sneaking in workouts during my lunch breaks, while Laura took care of her transformation at home. Together, we turned the basement into a makeshift gym, shedding our old selves and becoming stronger, both physically and mentally. We became leaner, more formidable, but all of it stayed hidden. Our spouses never noticed, too wrapped up in their own worlds to see the changes right under their noses. We wore loose clothing to keep the new us concealed, just as invisible to them as we'd been emotionally. Meanwhile, our connection deepened, growing in the shadows of our spouse's indifference. The passion between us was unlike anything I'd ever felt with Samantha, and it flared up more often than I expected. Bound by a shared goal to escape the mundane, we pushed ourselves further.
We transformed the basement once again, this time into a dance studio.
Neither of us knew what we were getting into, but with the help of YouTube tutorials, we made it work. Evenings and weekends that had once felt empty were now filled with the rhythm of dance. We started with the basics, then worked our way up to more complex routines. Salsa quickly became our favorite, something we saved for the height of our practice sessions, a celebration of our shared defiance and joy.
As time went on, I realized that being with Laura was like dancing on the edge of a volcano.
Her mood was unpredictable, like a storm just waiting to break loose. The mess with Samantha and Mark had broken something deep inside her, maybe her sense of reason, and now she was always on the verge of falling apart. I stayed alert, watching closely, knowing her rare moments of calm were found only in the heat of passion or when she was with her kids. Her love for them was fierce, unwavering, and the one thing that anchored her amidst her emotional whirlwind. Our playful insults, calling each other bastard and witch, had somehow morphed into twisted terms of endearment. Instead of cutting, they became symbols of our shared struggle, two people caught in the same storm, fighting to stay afloat. Beneath the surface of our unconventional bond, there was always a deeper mission that demanded both of us to be clever and cautious. Laura, with her sharp instincts, had set up a perfect daytime operation, sneaking around the construction company's trailer and taking photos with her phone. Her cousin's lack of proper security was our golden opportunity, and we took full advantage of it. We slipped in and out of that site more times than I could count, piecing together every bit of information we found hidden in the trailer. The most valuable finds, though, were tucked away in Mark's desk and even in Samantha's purse. It was like peeling back the layers of secrets they didn't think anyone would ever find. Things began to shift between Samantha and me after that. Without our usual arguments to fuel her, she seemed lost, almost like she needed those fights to justify something inside herself. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Either way, I had no energy left to entertain her. I was worn out from the long days with Laura. Slowly, it started to dawn on me Samantha might have been clinging to our arguments as a way to excuse her own actions. But with every day that passed without a fight, her confusion grew. Mark, on the other hand, had convinced himself that Laura had just given up. He believed she had resigned herself to whatever twisted situation they had, never realizing that behind the scenes, we were piecing together their lies. A stroke of luck came my way in the form of a $2,000 refund. It was money I'd put down as a deposit for a romantic getaway to a Mexican beach resort, a trip that was clearly off the table now. The refund came unexpectedly, but I wasn't going to complain. That money gave us some breathing room, a financial cushion that I knew we'd need in the coming days. As Samantha found more and more excuses to spend her nights away with Mark, Laura and I found our own escape through dance. We took our moves, the ones we'd honed in the secrecy of my basement, to a local club. It was a release, a way to test ourselves in the open, and for a while, it worked. But there was always an undercurrent of tension, something simmering beneath the surface, especially with Laura's unpredictable moods. She could swing from elation to near rage with just the slightest nudge. One night, things almost came crashing down. By then, Laura had become a completely different person, her transformation was undeniable. Between the fitness routine we stuck to and the intimate moments we shared, she had become the center of attention, her allure impossible to ignore. Everywhere we went, eyes were on her. She thrived under the spotlight, but she was careful not to cross any lines with other men, keeping her interactions at a distance. Still, clubs have a way of blurring boundaries. That night, while I danced with a bubbly blonde, things took a dangerous turn. A guy made an aggressive move on Laura, pushing past her clear refusals. Before I knew it, I was yanking Laura away by her hair just as her nails sliced across the man's face, narrowly missing his eye but leaving a deep mark on his cheek, a permanent reminder of her fierce side. The scene was seconds away from spiraling into chaos. But then, Laura twisted the situation in a way only she could. She pulled in close to me, her anger turning into something else entirely, a provocative challenge. "Bastard, that hurt," she hissed, her voice dripping with frustration before shifting into a sultry, teasing tone. "You sure know how to push my buttons, don't you?" Laura teased, her eyes flashing with mischief. Then, her gaze drifted to the blonde woman I'd been dancing with moments before. She winked at her, full of sly charm. "Sweetheart, you can do so much better than this guy. You deserve someone who's not a jerk." The tension from the club incident still hung heavy between us, the clash of danger and desire blurring the lines. Our relationship had become a complex dance, always teetering on the edge, never quite knowing what would happen next. As we hurried into the night, the air crackled with tension. We picked up the pace, instinctively moving faster when we saw three men in safety t-shirts closing in on us. The parking lot, lined with cars and eerily quiet, felt like a trap. And then, we spotted him, the guy Laura had scratched earlier. He was flanked by two friends, and they were heading straight for us with purpose. Laura's reaction was a strange mix of amusement and defiance. She smirked, that sharp, daring smile of hers flashing under the streetlights. "So formal," she taunted, "introducing yourself like that. What's the plan? Your buddy here tries to play the hero while you take your shot at me?" She stopped, faking submission, luring them in. But I saw that look in her eyes, the feral, unpredictable gleam I'd come to recognize all too well. As the biggest of the three men closed in behind me, my instincts kicked in. I wasn't some MMA fighter, but I'd been in enough scrapes to know how to handle myself. Still, my focus was on Laura. The way she moved, her wild spirit, was something that drew me in even in the middle of chaos. Before I could react, Laura attacked. Not with her fists, but with her teeth. She bit into the man's arm with a ferocity that made him scream in agony. I turned just in time to see her sink her teeth into his flesh again, and adrenaline surged through me. I jumped in, grabbing her with all my strength and pulling her back. "Laura, stop!" I shouted, locking eyes with her. For a moment, her gaze was wild, untamed. But then, just as suddenly, the storm in her calmed. A chilling smile crept across her face, and she stepped back, retreating from the chaos as if nothing had happened. That's when I noticed the two girls watching from a short distance, a petite blonde and a goth girl with dark hair. They were frozen in place, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief, completely stunned by what they had just witnessed. Laura's eyes flicked toward the blonde, and before I could say a word, she started walking toward her with a strange purpose. My gut told me to stop her, to pull her away before things spiraled out of control even further. "Laura, come on, she's not part of this," I warned, my voice edged with urgency. But Laura just smirked, her eyes full of secrets. "Oh, I know," she murmured, stepping in close to the blonde. And then, in a move I hadn't anticipated, she kissed her deeply and passionately. To my shock, the blonde kissed her back, completely taken by the moment. When they finally pulled apart, the blonde's gaze stayed locked on Laura, utterly bewitched. Laura leaned in close, her voice dripping with both venom and satisfaction. "Trust me," she whispered, "you deserve better than him." We didn't waste any more time. Our retreat to the car was quick, the distant wail of an ambulance cutting through the night as we sped off, leaving the chaos behind us. But the tension between us, between everything we'd gotten ourselves into, remained, pulling us deeper into this unpredictable and dangerous game. As we drove away in silence, the fear that our actions had been noticed gnawed at me. The weight of what we had done pressed down, neither of us daring to speak until we parked. Once the immediate panic of escape faded, Laura's desires took over, and the car became our refuge, offering a brief reprieve until she was satisfied. But when the moment passed, a different side of Laura emerged, vulnerable, raw. "I really screwed up, didn't I?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. The question lingered heavily between us. We all have our moments, but yeah, that was intense. I tried to keep it light, but the truth of what had happened couldn't be ignored. What unnerved me more than the violence itself was the satisfaction in her voice when she spoke about it. "It felt so good to hurt him," she confessed, a dark revelation that sent a chill through me. "That's a bit of a Hannibal Lecter vibe, Laura," I said, half joking, trying to ease the tension. Her sudden laugh broke through for a moment, but it didn't last. "Do you think his girlfriend was cool with it?" she quipped, trying to lighten the mood herself. But then her expression turned serious, catching me off guard. "Promise me, don't let me go there again." "Seriously," she pleaded, her voice trembling with fear. The rawness in her eyes startled me. It was a stark contrast to the fierce, unbreakable woman who had stood her ground against those men. Now, she looked fragile. "You were just defending yourself," I tried to reassure her, but she cut me off. "But I enjoyed it too much," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What if I lose myself next time?" Hearing the fear in her voice rattled me in a way that no confrontation ever had. Laura was walking a dangerous line, teetering on the edge of something that went beyond my ability to help. It wasn't just about my support anymore. She might need professional help, maybe medication, or someone to monitor her before things spiraled further. The aftermath of that night was surreal. The official report painted it as an altercation involving a gang of 6 men and a Hispanic woman, with a bystander named Chloe witnessing the whole thing. It was almost laughable, considering what really happened. "Looks like you left quite the impression on Chloe," I said, showing Laura the paperwork. Her smile was wistful, as if recalling some distant memory. "She seemed nice. Strawberry lip gloss and all," Laura mused. I chuckled. "Are you into girls now?" She shrugged. "It wasn't really about that. Just a bit of fun at the club." "But in that parking lot?" She was drawn to me, I could see it in her eyes. "And being with you?" "I guess I've just stopped seeing any boundaries when it comes to, well, anything," Laura added, her words trailing off. Despite everything, that chaotic night marked a turning point for her. Slowly but surely, she began to pull herself together. The progress was small, but noticeable. There were times when I saw the struggle in her, the inner battle to keep those darker impulses at bay. And sometimes, she actually succeeded. We couldn't always rely on Laura's sister to look after the kids, so Ryan often stayed with us. On those nights, as we tucked the children into bed, I found myself watching Laura. There was a softness to her then, a tenderness that rarely showed itself in the light of day. And when she caught me looking, she'd smile, a bittersweet expression, a mix of sorrow and warmth. It was like I was seeing the real Laura, the one who was fighting to emerge from the shadows of her own turmoil. In those quiet moments, it felt like her demons were far away, giving us a brief respite from the storm always brewing inside her. But that calm didn't last forever. I had a nagging feeling that things were about to escalate, and soon enough, they did. One day, Samantha caught me shirtless. Her eyes widened in surprise as she took in the changes in my body, changes I had kept hidden beneath baggy clothes for months. I quickly brushed off her comment, grabbing a shirt and covering up, but I could tell she wasn't buying it. My biggest concern wasn't that Samantha noticed my toned physique, but the marks Laura had left on my skin the night before. Her growing suspicion was a clear sign that it was time to escalate our plans. I confided in Laura, and from there, our routine took a sharp turn. Gone were the usual workouts and intimate moments. Now we were armed with a borrowed car and a digital camera, tailing Samantha and Mark from a safe distance. Laura's knack for detail soon paid off. By sifting through their receipts and credit card statements, she uncovered a pattern in their escapades. Samantha was cautious, keeping things well under wraps, but Mark? He underestimated Laura, and that's where he slipped up. His parents owned a modest beach cabin, tucked away in the woods. Despite its rundown appearance, the mileage on their car told us this was their hidden getaway spot, every Friday, right when they claimed to be at the gym.
One evening, we followed them again, parking just off the road. We moved quietly toward the cabin, camera ready. The lack of curtains worked in our favor, giving us a clear view of what was going on inside. By the time we found the perfect vantage point, Samantha and Mark were already tangled up on the bed, oblivious to everything beyond those four walls. Before we left, I deflated one of Mark's tires, a little insurance policy in case they decided to leave sooner than expected. We dropped off the film at a darkroom known for its discretion, the kind of place that handled sensitive imagery without asking questions. As we drove back, a mix of apprehension and thrill hung in the air between us. We just crossed a line, and there was no going back. Samantha staggered home well past her usual time, her disheveled appearance a testament to a night gone wrong, clothes wrinkled, hair a mess. The next day, Laura could barely contain her amusement as she told me how Mark not only had to change a tire but also ran over a nail, forcing them into a miserable pit stop in the rain, miles from home. Talk about karma, she chuckled, the delight clear in her voice. In the following days, our conversation shifted toward the future, what we each wanted out of it. When Laura proposed something unexpected, I was initially taken aback. But after giving it some thought, I found myself agreeing with her plan. We laid low for about 3 weeks, biding our time until the moment was right. By then, we'd noticed a clear pattern in Samantha and Mark's weekends: gym, illicit rendezvous, nightclub, and finally, home in the early hours of Sunday. But this particular weekend, we had something else in mind. With the kids safely at Laura's sister's place, we set our mission into motion. The first stop? A shopping spree. Laura picked out a stunning dark emerald dress that clung to her curves, the deep neckline and short hem accentuating every feature. It was bold, daring, exactly what the night called for. I went with a sleek dark gray suit, paired with a black shirt, simple yet striking. Our next destination was a high-end salon, where I encouraged the stylists to unleash their creativity on Laura's hair and makeup. By the time they were done, she looked like a completely different woman, absolutely mesmerizing. Transformed in Dress to Kill, we made our way to the club. As soon as we walked through the doors, it was clear we were a force to be reckoned with. Laura radiated confidence, her presence commanding attention without even trying. We didn't pause at the door for a second, the night was ours, and we were ready to set the final part of our plan into motion. The bouncer, recognizing the energy we exuded, waved us through without a second glance. We made a beeline for the dance floor, setting the tone for the night before steering toward our real target, Samantha and Mark's usual haunt. They had a preferred spot, what I'd come to think of as their marital throne, nestled in a secluded corner of the club. There they were, Samantha, draped in a yellow dress I'd never seen before, looking every bit the picture of grace and sophistication. Mark sat beside her, sharply dressed in a tailored blue suit. In contrast, Laura was a vision of rebellious glamour, her outfit a statement of defiance against the traditional elegance surrounding us. She turned heads with every step, while I followed, making a show of seating her with a flourish. Their stunned silence spoke louder than words as we joined them, uninvited. I started the conversation with a casual jab at the venue's opulence, trying to keep it light, but Mark's scowl at Laura turned the air cold. The tension only grew when they commented on Laura's dress. "You splurged on this?" Samantha asked, her tone a mix of disdain and curiosity. "It wasn't a splurge," I said, barely keeping my irritation in check. "It was a purchase." Then, I laid out the photographs, evidence of their secret rendezvous, carefully selecting the most unflattering shots from our little covert operation. Images of them at their worst, captured in compromising moments. I tossed them onto the table like a poker player laying down a royal flush. The money came from part of a refund, I added with a bitter edge. A romantic getaway I'd planned for Samantha and me. Since that's off the table, I figured I'd invest in something else, revealing. Samantha's face flickered with disappointment, or maybe it was the sudden realization of an unexpected financial oversight. Whatever it was, it didn't escape my notice. For the first time, a crack appeared in her perfect facade, hinting at the swirling mess of emotions beneath the surface. As the photos sprawled across the table, the tension thickened. Mark's smugness wavered, revealing a flicker of fear. Samantha, meanwhile, had gone pale, her usual confidence shattered. "So," I began, my voice dripping with sarcasm, "how long has this been going on?" 4 months now, huh? How did you expect to keep this hidden? Mark tried to regain control, smirking as if the whole thing didn't bother him. And what? You two fell hopelessly in love?
Laura's response was sharp, her grin cutting through the air like a knife.
In love? With him? Not a chance. He's a jerk. And her?
Laura glanced at Samantha with undisguised contempt. I couldn't stand her if I tried.
Then, Laura's smile shifted, taking on a predatory edge.
But the sex, she paused, letting the words hang in the air, a wicked gleam in her eyes.
It's out of this world. Pure, raw, and fueled by vengeance. We've explored places you wouldn't dare even dream of.
Her gaze locked onto Samantha, cold and calculating, as if she were sizing her up for a final blow.
Venturing into realms of pleasure you've never even considered. Samantha's reaction was visceral.
Shock and hurt flashed across her face as she turned to me.
This is beyond betrayal. We were supposed to be partners. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. There was no humor in it, just a twisted irony. Partners?
You've been biding your time with him, I accused, feeling the anger swell inside me like a boiling pot.
Indulging in secret trysts while I played the dutiful recluse.
My office became a parade of bad news, all while you flaunted your affair, making a mockery of our lives. The air was thick with accusations and revelations. Once hidden truths now lay bare, turning our private failures into a public spectacle. There was no need for spies or secrets, everything was out in the open, irrevocably changing the game. Just as my temper threatened to spill over, I felt Laura give my leg a reassuring squeeze. This time, she was the calm one, taking charge with a poise I admired. Divorces are going to be straightforward, she said, her voice steady.
They're all about cheating. It won't change the money situation, but let's be honest, it's only right, and it'll definitely make us feel a bit better. My new hobby?
Making sure everyone sees those photos, along with a detailed story of how you wrecked your marriage and let down your families, colleagues, and bosses. I'll even track down your first-grade Sunday school teacher. Her gaze lingered on Mark for a moment, and I could sense the satisfaction radiating from her. Oh, and I'm moving in with my sister for a bit, taking Olivia with me.
I straightened, feeling the weight of the moment. What's really going to hit you hard is that you two have been dipping into funds from a building materials account at a construction company. It took us ages to piece it together, but when Laura and I saw how you were living it up, spending like there was no tomorrow, we knew something was off. Turns out we've gathered more than enough evidence to prove it. The room shifted, tension tightening like a noose. You're looking at tax evasion, wire fraud, even mail fraud. So even if Mark's cousin turns a blind eye, you're in deep trouble. You, Mark, might get off with 5 to 10 years behind bars. I pointed squarely at him, then turned my gaze to Samantha. And you're not off the hook either. A few years in the slammer for being an accomplice. Samantha's eyes widened, panic spreading across her face. I didn't know.
I thought it was his money, and I just put it in the account to keep it safe in case of a divorce. Right, I cut her off, barely containing my disgust.
You were just holding it for a friend?
Besides, mixing that money with our divorce, if my name was on that account, I'd think you were setting me up.
Trust me, that would end really badly for you.
I could see the realization dawning on their faces, the color draining as the weight of the situation sank in. It was time to lay down our cards, and I felt a surge of authority.
Mark, listen up. You've got one shot at a better life. Take it.
Quit your job and make a break for the mountains, at least 250 miles away. Pack your car with just your clothes, your football trophies, and your yearbook.
Nothing else, not a single extra thing.
Laura's going to file for divorce, and she won't see a cent from it, thanks to your little arrangement with your cousin. We won't breathe a word to the police or your cousin about what's going on, but if your cousin stumbles upon this mess and decides to act?
That's on you. I'd advise you to return any money you've got to his company account.
Believe me, whether or not he comes after you might just depend on that. The tension in the room hung heavy, thick and suffocating, wrapping around us like a noose. This moment was more than a crossroads for Mark, it was his last chance to escape a looming disaster.
I turned my attention to Samantha, steady and resolute. I'm filing for divorce. I get the kids. No alimony for you, and your affair is the reason. It's straightforward, agree to this, or face the consequences. When it comes to our belongings, jot down what you want, but keep it brief. You'll get your clothes and whatever shoes you desire. Laura couldn't help but jump in with a smirk.
You can have your things, but honestly, your shoes don't fit me, and I have no interest in your wardrobe. And since I've stopped wearing underwear around him, your granny panties are all yours. I couldn't suppress a grin at Laura's audacity, while Samantha struggled to hold on to her composure.
Find a job. Move back in with your parents or whoever you can. It doesn't matter to me.
You'll have plenty of opportunities to see the kids, I won't stop you.
You're an adequate mother, and I won't bring your parents into this mess.
They don't need to know why we're ending things. I held their gazes, making sure they understood the gravity of the situation.
You have until midnight tomorrow. If Mark isn't long gone by then, I'll be informing his cousin and the police.
This deal only stands if you both agree to it. Laura leaned in, her dramatic neckline a bold statement, perhaps a final shot at Samantha.
You two have done something remarkable, really. You've brought Laura and me together.
We always claimed we had nothing in common, picking a movie was a battleground. I'd be checked out completely if he went off on his hobbies, I stated, a mixture of sarcasm and sincerity lacing my words. It was a moment heavy with decisions and consequences, yet there was an unexpected sense of closure hanging in the air.
Maybe this was the start of something new. Laura's gaze was locked on Mark, sharp and predatory.
The only way we figured out how to deal with you was by connecting in the one way we could, through each other.
We made love. That was our only solace.
If we ever sat down for dinner, it was merely to refuel for another round.
Her eyes shifted to Samantha, a cold glint in them.
I can't fathom why you'd leave him for someone like Mark.
And don't think I'm playing games here. If you doubt it, why not join us next time? It might just turn up the heat if that's even possible.
Checking my watch, I realized it was time to conclude this uncomfortable gathering.
We've got to adhere to the terms. Sorry, but I need to go pick up the kids.
As I stood, reaching for Laura, I noticed a shift in her. She was no longer fueled by rage but instead emanated a newfound calmness, her fiery spirit intact, yet the madness had dissipated. Samantha wasted no time, showing up at my door shortly after I tucked the kids into bed. We need to talk, she declared, stepping inside. I sank into an armchair, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. This discussion is long overdue, I said, trying to find my footing. But we can't let him drive us apart.
Wait a minute, I interrupted, raising my hand.
The real issue in our marriage is right in front of me.
Samantha's face shifted, revealing an expression of disdain that was foreign to me. You don't understand, Samantha. Your situation could have been far worse. Laura fought for you, advocated for your cause, and even tried to shift the blame onto Mark. You can't imagine the effort that took. She despises you, yet she went to bat for you, believing that this mess is partly her fault.
I don't necessarily agree, but a deal is a deal, I said, keeping my rising anger in check. If that money had been hidden in my name or if the twins had a different father, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Samantha's complexion drained as the weight of reality settled in. When do I need to leave? She finally asked. Technically, by midnight tomorrow for the sake of symmetry. But you've got a week. It'll take you at least 2 days to pack all those shoes, and honestly, I can't wait to see them gone. Her response was barely a whisper, an apology as she turned and headed upstairs. It took her 5 days to clear out, leaving behind only echoes of her presence in a home that now felt stark and lonely, even with the laughter of the twins. It was too quiet, too empty. Rumor had it that Mark's cousin was searching for him but was steering clear of the police. I hoped Mark had found a decent hiding spot. Crossing his cousin would be a huge mistake. And perhaps, just maybe, I hadn't been entirely silent about where he might be. 2 weeks later, I decided the twins could spend the weekend with Samantha and her family.
They knew the rules, and Samantha understood that any misstep could lead to serious consequences. Then, just before midnight, a knock echoed through the stillness. I opened the door to find Laura, radiating energy as if the night were just getting started. Her excitement was infectious. "Gone?" she asked, glancing at Samantha's parents, who were still trying to piece together the divorce petition that had Chester scrawled across it in bright red lipstick. "Thanks for mailing that," Laura said, a gleam in her eye. "Figured it was time for a parting gift." "Let's stir the pot," I replied, a half-smile creeping onto my lips. I'd promised not to involve Samantha's parents in this mess, but Laura had made no such commitment. In fact, she'd done the opposite. Soon, Samantha's family and friends would be receiving packages that would leave her with years of explaining to do. Laura's grin widened. "Brought you a housewarming present." I almost pointed out that I hadn't actually moved, but then it struck me, she was right. The house felt different now, almost like a fresh start. "I think it's time for dessert." A familiar face peeked from behind Laura, shy and curious. Chloe had joined us, innocent and unprepared for the whirlwind she was about to enter. We welcomed her into our chaos more as a spark than a partner, and she didn't seem to mind. Between Laura and me, Chloe got a crash course in indulgence, her eager reactions proving she was a quick learner. Laura wore that victorious smirk, the cat who had gotten the cream as the morning light crept in, helping Chloe to her car, her steps unsteady from the night's festivities. Days turned into a rhythm of their own. Sometimes Laura would arrive alone, while other times she brought Olivia and Tom. When the house quieted and the children drifted off to sleep, Laura would silently take my hand, leading me to a place where words became superfluous. Our movements turned into a slow dance of rediscovery. Afterward, as we lay together, her head resting on my shoulder, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns on my chest, the silence felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Laura, we can't keep doing this," I finally broke the stillness, feeling her body tense at my words. "It's like we agreed without actually saying it. We have nothing in common, no emotional ties, and this silence, it's unsettling." Her laughter, soft and knowing, vibrated against my skin as she traced a heart around mine. "You must have been a slow learner as a kid. Did they need to bring in a specialist to teach you to walk?" "Very funny," I retorted softly, a hint of sarcasm in my voice. The situation with Samantha had been orchestrated by Laura. She was a puzzle wrapped in layers of complexity, her motives often hard to decipher. Maybe she believed that redemption was a rare gem, or perhaps she wanted Samantha to witness the full weight of her loss. There was no denying it, Samantha lost everything she held dear, and Laura had orchestrated it all with precision. Yet, I doubted that Laura would take pleasure in Samantha's imprisonment. That wouldn't allow her to savor the drama she craved. In time, I suspected Laura might even influence how Samantha viewed her own daughters. This whole saga, beginning with Laura standing defiantly in the rain, seemed to have been part of a grander design. But I hesitated to probe deeper. The answer might be just as intricate as her plans. Laura had carved out a unique space in my heart. While she might not have Samantha's traditional beauty, that didn't matter. Her love was fierce, unwavering, and total, the kind that clings on until there's nothing left but dust. Chloe had become a regular presence in our lives, thanks to Laura. Yet, she wasn't here to disrupt anything. To Laura, Chloe was more like a bonus, a little something special she wanted to share. Laura once described Chloe as a slice of cheesecake you can't finish alone, but are more than happy to enjoy together. That was Laura's way of showing love, quirky and a bit unconventional. Yes, she could be manipulative, a whirlwind of chaos that sometimes veered into dangerous territory. But that was Laura, in all her complexity.